You're listening to the Food City Podcast, the show that takes you behind the scenes of your favorite supermarket.
From new products, expert tips on meal planning, and all things community, let's dive in and see what's in store today.
Hi, everybody. My name is Megan. I'm a clinical health coach, and I'm joined today with Nicole, one of the clinical dietitians with Food City, and we are going to talk about stress today. April is Stress Awareness Month, and we're going to see what stress is, how it affects our bodies and our minds, and how medications and nutrition can play a significant role in our stress response. So what is stress? So it is a natural response to challenges and threats that can involve physical, mental, even emotional tension. So it's kind of like the background noise of our lives. I think everybody's experienced it at one point or another, whether it's juggling work, family, or just trying to keep up with life in general. It seems like it sometimes never leaves. So I think this can relate to everybody, and it's an important topic to talk about.
Yeah, I really think this is probably one of the more relevant to everybody who's listening topics that we have discussed or will discuss, because most people in our fast-paced environment have faced stress, whether it is kind of acute in the moment or they feel kind of just chronically bogged down by stress. So hopefully we can talk about some ways to manage that as well. But first off, I mean, when your body responds to stress or feels stress, we kind of refer to that as your fight or flight mode. And what happens is your brain sends signals to your body to release certain chemicals, so cortisol and adrenaline, and that is just your body's way of helping you to manage or deal with the stress. So what do they do? Cortisol is a stress hormone that has functions like increasing your blood sugar. And that might not sound bad, but in the immediate moment, it gives your body more energy, can help with focus to a certain extent to help your body respond to that stress and deal with whatever you're facing, whatever the kind of catalyst is. And then adrenaline is going to increase your heart rate, helps you breathe faster, so your muscles are going to get more oxygen and energy to respond quickly in the moment. So that's kind of in the short term. It makes you more alert, it makes you more focused, helps you to respond to those things. It can improve your vision. Yeah. But when we're talking about stress, it's usually not in a positive way. Right. We talk about kind of chronically feeling stress. So let's talk a little bit about what are some long-term effects of chronic stress.
Yeah. And it can affect your body in a lot of different ways. Long-term stress can weaken your immune system, your heart health. It can cause your blood pressure to go up, increase your risk of heart disease and stroke. It can even damage your blood vessels over time, which can lead to some really serious health problems. Digestion, it can affect your digestion, the way your medications are absorbed, heartburn, stomach ulcers, and then, of course, mental health. Constant stress can lead to mental health issues like anxiety and depression. So it can really affect your mood, your memory, and your ability to think clearly over time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And some of the way stress affects your mental well-being is anxiety. Ongoing stress makes you feel constantly worried or on edge, can feel nervousness, depression. It can lower your levels of chemicals that make you feel happy, like dopamine and serotonin. So that can lead to feeling sad or hopeless, and then burnout. I mean, if you're under constant stress with life or work, it can just make you feel like you're burnout and you don't want to do anything. And then sleep problems is another big thing. If you're stressed, it can actually cause your sleep to be not as well as it should be, which can also then affect your mood the next day, and it's kind of a vicious cycle there. So,
and then it leads to more stress.
Right, exactly. It just keeps going and going.
Yeah, sleep and stress go hand in hand often.
Yeah. So, which is why it's really important to try and get stress under control. It can start small, but the longer you let it go on without managing it, the bigger a problem it can become. So we all know stress is a part of life, but how does it affect our eating habits, do you think?
Yeah, well, I think there are a variety of ways. Most of us have probably faced this scenario at one point or another where you are stressed and it can lead you to sometimes emotionally eat, reactive eating. But stress can actually sometimes increase our hunger, especially if it's accompanied by poor sleep. That actually raises our hunger hormones. So we're not just imagining it. It's not just emotional. We're feeling more hungry. So that can also cause us to overeat when we don't necessarily need the calories. If our blood sugar is raised, that can be a response to that as well. But there's also something called decision fatigue, which is kind of a psychology term. that refers to the more decisions that you have to make, the lower your capacity is to make quality, well-informed decisions. And so we make like thousands of decisions every single day when we start up. And typically what you'll find is the quality of your decisions, maybe early in the morning, you have a little bit more willpower, but by the end of the day, a practical example would be getting home from work. You don't know what to cook. You've already had maybe a stressful day at work or school or whatever you're facing, and you turn to maybe foods that are going to give you some quick glucose to help kind of immediately, in the immediate, help you deal with that fatigue. So it could be something sugary, it could be something salty, those high satisfaction foods that are not necessarily super nutrient dense. And so those are just some of the ways that it can affect our eating patterns that can build up over time. And I think that's why it's so important to have a plan in place to help navigate that decision fatigue, so you don't actually have to make a decision in the moment. Something as simple as writing down what you're going to eat. And so that's one decision that's made. Purchasing the groceries, having everything laid out and organized, that's another decision that's already made for you that you don't have to make when you get home.
Yeah, those are some good tips, and that makes a lot of sense. I know I'm usually exhausted by the end of the day, so that's really good advice.
Right.
So are there certain foods that actually can help reduce our stress?
Well, I think there's certainly not a single kind of magic pill or magic food even, or magic vitamin or mineral that is going to immediately help you deal with stress. I think the most important thing, of course, is dealing with healthy coping mechanisms. However, there are certain foods that are going to help boost our mood, support brain function, and reduce inflammation, which are all going to be linked to stress reduction. So deep blue and purple fruits like berries, they're going to be rich in antioxidants, compounds that help support overall health. But some studies have linked them to improved cognition and also decreased risk of developing depression over time, improved memory, and even increased memory and inhibition. And then dark leafy green vegetables. So you're going to notice a pattern.
Yes.
These are foods that we talk about a lot of the time because they're helpful for heart health. They're helpful for lowering our blood pressure. They're good for blood sugar management. But so there's a reason for
another reason to eat
fruits
them.
and vegetables. But dark leafy green vegetables like chard, spinach, kale are going to be rich in something called magnesium. And magnesium is a mineral that boosts serotonin activity. And serotonin is that feel good, or we kind of refer to it as that happy hormone. It's a neurotransmitter that affects our mood. And the most notable sign of magnesium deficiency is actually going to be fatigue. And so fatigue, stress, they tend to go hand in hand as well. But some Americans often we don't get enough magnesium in our diet. So some other good sources to include besides just your dark leafy greens are going to be lentils, nuts and seeds. Avocado contains magnesium, even dark chocolate. So that's one that you don't necessarily hear about as often as maybe fruits and vegetables. And then some that probably more people are familiar with because it's kind of referred to as the happy vitamin, happiness vitamin, vitamin D, or sunshine vitamin. So in the summer months, we tend to get a lot more vitamin D. Our body produces it from sun exposure. But in the winter months, even kind of early spring, we're not exposed to as much sunlight, and so our bodies aren't producing it. So that's going to be found in fatty fish, mushrooms even that are exposed to UV sunlight. Not just fatty fish, but fish with its bones, actually. So kind of mackerel, you can get kind of canned salmon with its bones. And then dairy sources that have been fortified with vitamin D, as well as egg yolks.
Okay. So then on the opposite end of the spectrum there, are any foods that will increase stress that we should probably try and limit or avoid?
Yeah, I think a couple come to mind. So caffeine, while in the immediate, it can actually improve mood and improve focus. So it can actually be a beneficial thing when dealing with stress, especially if it's part of like a morning ritual. You have your morning cup of joe, and that can help. It can be a calming thing for a lot of people, but excessive amounts of caffeine can increase jitters. So you're getting, anxiety with that. So avoiding excessive sources, I would say, from, especially when it's paired with sugar, like from energy drinks or soda, can be negative.
Yeah.
It can also impact sleep. And again, it's going hand in hand with stress. So if you're having too much caffeine later in the day, then that can be a negative thing.
Right.
Alcohol is similar in that respect, in that it disrupts your sleep. While in the immediate, it can, again, be maybe if it's a ritual for some people, it can kind of help to soothe you at the end of the day. But making that habit and constantly disrupting your sleep can have negative impacts on stress. And then refined carbohydrates and sugary foods, which ironically are the things we tend to turn to when we're stressed, right?
Yeah.
When we talked about that, how it impacts our eating habits, those tend to be the ones that we're reaching for the most often to kind of help soothe us. But it can lead to spikes in blood sugar and then crashes in blood sugar, leaving us with low energy and feeling more fatigued. And then again, the cycle just repeats itself. So that kind of brings me, I talked a little bit about some of the vitamins and some of the minerals. It can be challenging at times to get food sources of those things. What about supplements for helping to manage stress if our diet can't meet those needs?
And there are several that people will turn to help with that. Some people take what they call adaptogens, like ashwagandha or rhodiola. It helps your body adapt to stress. There's also L-theanine. It's an amino acid that's found in green tea, and it helps you relax without feeling drowsy. Magnesium, you mentioned, is really important, so a lot of people will turn to magnesium supplements to help if you're not getting enough in the diet. Ginseng is also commonly used for boosting your energy and improving your mental clarity. And then for relaxation, a lot of people will use valerian root or chamomile tea. But it's important to keep in mind that supplements are they're just supplements. So they're best used with combining with healthy lifestyle and diet. And then, of course, you always want to check with your health care provider first just to make sure that you're a candidate for it and that it's not going to interact with any medications you might be taking.
Yeah, 100%. I'm in full agreement with that. Effort should be made when it's possible to meet nutrient needs. Through diet, and then kind of finding healthy coping mechanisms to deal with stress. But there is certainly a role for supplements, as we've talked about in the past. And I think that applies to stress management as well. I think, especially for certain supplements, they're not necessarily going to have a negative impact most of the time for most people. Again, always consult with your healthcare provider if you are taking medications, or if there are certain drug nutrient interactions, you want to be sure that you are careful to avoid those. But for something like chamomile tea, there's not really any negative impact to having chamomile tea, and it could potentially have a physiological benefit on stress. But more than that, I think the ritual itself can help be very soothing and meditative to help deal with that stress. If that's part of your kind of plan and your routine.
Right.
And stress and sleep often go hand in hand. So what advice do you have for managing stress to improve sleep? And are there any medications, products, supplements that you would recommend to help improve sleep?
Yeah, and I'm sure most people have heard it's really important to establish a sleep routine, which is probably something that's challenging sometimes for us with our busy lives and not getting to start winding down in time. But trying to go to bed at the same time every night, getting our 7 to 8 hours of sleep that's recommended. You mentioned caffeine, so trying to avoid it in the afternoon and evening because that can disrupt our sleep cycle, and then limit screen time, which is probably one of the biggest challenges that I know I have a problem with that sometimes. So it's a big challenge too, but trying to limit that before screen time to give our brains time to just kind of unplug and unwind. And if you're still having trouble sleeping, you can try a supplement like melatonin, or chamomile tea can help with that as well. But if stress is really affecting your sleep, then a healthcare provider might recommend a medication to help in the short term. Some over-the-counter ones are melatonin you can take, and then Unisom, valerian root might help, but it should only be used short term. Lifestyle changes like reducing your stress through relaxation techniques like meditation, deep breathing, Yoga even can improve your sleep environment. Sticking to a consistent routine. Those are all usually more effective in the long run. So you really got to change your habits.
And I think it's important. I mean, our body naturally produces melatonin, right? And sun exposure, caffeine, things that can disrupt that natural production is why people turn to supplements again. They can be beneficial in the short term, but long term, you want to make sure that your body is responding the way that it should be, that you're getting sleep. And I think, what do you think about like blue light? You said screen time, so reducing screen time. What about like glasses to help?
Yeah, the glasses to help with the blue light. And then also you can change the setting on your phone after a certain time to turn the blue light off. So that can help. But the ideal thing would be able to like turn the screens off and not even see it for an hour or two before bed.
Yeah, I completely agree. Well, speaking of, you talked a little bit about medications and supplements. Are there any medications that, or can stress affect the way that medications work?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Stress can increase our blood pressure and heart rate, like we mentioned. So that can really have an effect on how your blood pressure medication works. If you're on it, it won't be as effective. It can also impact your digestive system. So it can really affect how well your medication is being absorbed. If it's not getting absorbed like it should, then it's not going to work as well. So it's just, if you're on medication, it's important to monitor any changes on how you feel and then talk to your healthcare provider if you feel like something's off. So
yeah, 100%. And what role do prescription medications play in stress management? When should someone consider maybe seeking help from their doctor on something like that?
If stress is chronic and it's affecting your ability to function or affecting your life, then there are several prescription medications. Antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications are two of the most common ones used. You should consider seeking help from a doctor if you're feeling overwhelmed. Like, don't be afraid to go talk to somebody about it. If stress is affecting your daily life, like I said, or if you're experiencing symptoms of anxiety or depression, like we talked about, and it's not going to go away with lifestyle changes alone. Say you've already tried that, still having it, then definitely I would talk to your healthcare provider about possibly getting on something to help manage that.
Well, you are a clinical health coach, but you're also a pharmacist, obviously, if it's not obvious from your expertise on kind of medications and what role they play. So how can pharmacists help people to better manage their stress? What role do pharmacists have in kind of education on the proper use of medications?
Pharmacists they're so easily accessible. So I know patients can come up and talk to us at any time, and we can really help if you're nervous about medications, kind of help ease your mind with that, help go through any side effects, educate about the safe use of your medications, including any over-the-counter products or prescriptions. So just help understand interactions between medications and then help with suggesting healthier alternatives or lifestyle modifications also.
And what are some of the misconceptions around medications that pharmacists could help alleviate for people?
Probably one of the biggest misconceptions is that people think medications for stress or anxiety. There used to be a lot of taboo behind it, like you didn't want to talk about if you had any kind of mental health issues, but it's starting to become more and more open, which is great. But a lot of people think still it's only for people who are really struggling, which is not the case. In reality, medications can be a part of a treatment plan for anybody. Anyone that's experiencing ongoing stress or anxiety, we can help clear up any confusion about how they work and provide guidance on their proper use.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and then going off that, how do you think a pharmacist and a dietitian can work together to help individuals manage stress?
Well, you talked a little bit about the important role that a pharmacist has. Obviously, their expertise is in medications and what they're used for and can kind of clear up some of those misconceptions. A dietitian tends to focus on food, and then we both have a little bit of a role to play in supplements as well. But pharmacists and dietitians, as well as all healthcare providers, should work with, if it's patients, if it's customers, kind of clients who you're dealing with, to develop a comprehensive and individualized care plan for that person that addresses both stress management, but then also nutrition, sleep. And there are a bunch of different lifestyle factors that are going to come to play with that. But for example, a pharmacist might recommend supplements or medications that can help to manage that stress, and then a dietitian can work with somebody to create a meal plan or kind of some go-to ingredients. Dark leafy greens, vegetables, salmon, fatty fish, things like that are going to have a role to play in sleep, in boosting mood and kind of hopefully lowering that stress, because it all works together. Again, there's no one-size-fits-all approach, and there's no magic bullet that you're going to be able to take.
Yeah.
But when you're looking at the whole picture and how things interact, that's going to be the best bet for everybody.
Yeah, that's great advice. And it's not, like you said, there's no one magic bullet, and it's not going to be a quick fix. This is something that you have to kind of develop habits and stick with over time.
Yeah.
So if you could give one piece of advice to someone who's feeling overwhelmed by stress, but they don't want to rely on medications, what would you tell them?
Yeah. Well, I think focusing on self-care and developing coping mechanisms to help deal with that stress. A lot of the things that you mentioned could be beneficial. You mentioned chamomile tea. Now, that's not a medication. It is kind of a supplement. Again, I mentioned maybe some of the physiological benefits of taking those.
Yeah.
But I think even more important is going to be that ritual. So ritual can be really, really beneficial. Separate from routine, which I think can give structure and help people, but sometimes people get overwhelmed by their routine and feel stressed. So I think talking to somebody that you trust to maybe develop some of those coping mechanisms to help deal with it. And then don't forget the power of getting 8 hours of sleep, 9 hours of sleep if you can. Something that we didn't talk about before is, and I wanted to ask, a lot of people maybe have more or less the same schedule Monday through Friday. Now, unfortunately, for a lot of us, we don't get enough sleep Monday through Friday. We're getting up for school or getting up for work or whatever it is, and then we stay up too late. But for some people, they might try to catch up, or in their mind, they think that they are catching up on sleep on the weekends by sleeping in a little bit later. Do you think that that's effective? Do you think it's beneficial? Is it maybe there's a middle ground where if you can't be consistent 7 days a week, there's benefit to that?
Me personally, I know I don't get enough sleep a lot of times during the week. So I do tend to try and play catch up on the weekends, and I think it can be refreshing for you, but you do read a lot and hear from the studies that it is better to stay consistent all the time, to try and go to bed at the same time instead of staying up later because you don't have to wake up early. So yes, it is probably better to be able to stick to that schedule, but that's a hard thing to do in personal life. I know for me anyway.
I guess just checking in with yourself to ask yourself, do you feel rejuvenated?
Yeah.
Are you functioning at your best would be a good check. But as much as you can stick to that routine.
Yeah. And what you said, check in with yourself. It's just another important thing to remember is to just listen to your body and also just make time for yourself with all of the stress management techniques we talked about. Just setting aside time for yourself to care for yourself is just one of the most important things too that a lot of people just tend to skip, but we really need to start focusing on more.
Yeah. And it really is about a bunch of different lifestyle factors. We talked about that many times. One thing that we didn't touch on as intently is physical activity, because physical activity can be, it actually increases stress in the moment. It's going to increase blood pressure. It's going to increase those things in the moment, but that's a natural response. In reality, it can have a massive impact on our mood, our mental health, and stress reduction in the long run, and even just, after you're done your workout.
And even if you can't do intense physical activity, just walking, even going outside, getting your vitamin D while you're walking, you're kind of doing a couple of things at one time. So exercise is really important. Just anything that you can do, whether it's walking, jogging, biking, anything to get your heart rate up and kind of get the dopamine flowing.
Okay. What are some last few things to incorporate to help reduce stress? We talked about physical activity. We talked about sleep, talked about self-care. Any other habits or tips?
I think meditation or just mindfulness. I know a lot of people hear that word and they just kind of like, oh, that's not for me. But if you really just sit down and devote a few minutes a day to just sit and take some deep, focused breaths, just that can make a huge difference. Breathing exercises, they really do wonders. And just make time for activities that you enjoy and that help you unwind, like reading, spending time with your family, and then just not be afraid to talk to somebody, whether it be a therapist, a friend, family member, just not being afraid to talk to somebody if you do start to to feel overwhelmed
by it. And like you can't go to those strategies. You need external help to help manage that. Absolutely. Great advice. I mean, we could talk about this for hours. There's just so much content on reducing stress, helping to manage it better. And people can learn a little bit more about just all things wellness by signing up for the Wellness Club. If you're not currently a member, of course, you can get expert advice from a dietitian, from our clinical health coach and pharmacist on medication management, but also just all kinds of lifestyle tips. You'll also get recipes and special savings. So go to the Wellness Club and sign up.